For those of you tuning in for the first time, this is the Standard Bank National Youth Jazz Festival 2021 virtual, and I'm here with Neil Gonzalez. Neil, I just wanted to ask you, can you just do a brief bio of yourself, a brief introduction?
Yeah, my name is Neil Gonzalez. I'm a pianist, composer, an educator. I've been involved with the festival over many years. Visited quite a few times, played on the festival, taught at the festival, though not in recent times to be honest, but we send students down from UKZN where I teach every year, and they all come back full of enthusiasm and telling me all kinds of things that they've learned at the festival that I tell them every day, but they never believe me. So I'm always very glad for those visits. I'm based in Durban. And I've just released a new album, yeah, so I'm quite excited about that. I've been working at home like most people, teaching remotely and trying to navigate all of those challenges. It's been a busy week actually, because it's kind of the final assessments and trying to bring all of these various strands together. The last year has been much more of a kind of improvised situation than normal. But luckily I'm a jazz musician, so kind of it's second nature.
Okay, fantastic. So my understanding is that Blessings and Blues was your latest release. And I was wondering, I think it is. And I was wondering if you could tell me if COVID had anything to do with it, anything to do with the name itself, and what it was like producing the album during COVID.
Sorry, I hesitated because technically Blessings and Blues is my latest release. But you know, when the album was recorded in 2019, right at the end of 2019, just before we were dealing with the pandemic. And once we went into lockdown, suddenly in terms of this kind of new situation of working from home and having a bit more time on my hands, and also just trying to make sense of everything that was going on, I did record a solo piano album called Concert for One, which I released digitally. So technically that is my kind of last recording, but I released that immediately because with that recording, I've always had this idea of wanting to compose, perform, and produce an album within a very short period of time. And I was able to do that album within a week, like just kind of from start to finish. So it was one of those things I was able to tick off my bucket list. But yeah, Blessings and Blues was recorded before COVID. So I think in terms of subject matter and so on, it doesn't really have to do with COVID, but all of the kind of production work, the artwork, all of this kind of stuff, the mixing and mastering, all of that stuff happened during COVID. And so I think that there is still some kind of sense of this weird other that does imbue the album as well. But really, I recorded the album in 2019 when I turned 50. And so for me, it was a very celebratory year. And I always say that South Africans know how to do celebration. I don't think we really know how to do COVID. I mean, I'm not saying anyone knows how to do that, but just in terms of music that is about being loud and being expressive and about being close to each other. Because South Africans, we could be right next to each other, but we always speak much louder than we really have to. So yeah, there was lots of kinds of festive occasions to be celebrated in 2019, and I think the music, most of which was composed in that year, kind of captures that spirit. And I think for people that listen to the album, in a way, it's quite different from what we're experiencing now, because what we're experiencing now is this idea of social distancing. And what the album actually is about is the opposite of that. It's actually about being completely social, and in a very kind of human way, not this kind of remote screen time kind of way, you know. So yeah, so it's so the album is actually not of this time in a way, but in some other respects, part of it was produced during this time. So there is that element as well.
Okay, apologies for the mistake there. I wanted to ask as well, what I really love about your music is its deceptive simplicity that really disguises the complexity of what's going on underneath it all. I was wondering if you could please elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, I guess for me, it's not something that I necessarily seek to create. I don't think of things being simple or complex. I mean, simply a function of what I kind of come up with, or what I create, how I put things together, and ultimately that is guided by some kind of intuitive sense, some feeling of hearing the music. I think that's quite important for me, is to try to find a solution to compositional problems that are efficient, but that I feel very connected with. So I'm not trying to contrive anything. So for me, I don't think of a triad, for example, as something that's simple. Or it's not necessarily simpler than a very extended chord, you know, like some kind of complex harmony, or like playing a very simple chord progression is not. I use the word simple. Let's just say a 2 or 3 chord functional harmony kind of thing, like 1-4-5, is not simpler to me than playing like some crazy chord progression. So I don't think of it in those terms. So I mentioned triads. That is kind of a basic unit of information that's very fundamental to my own kind of musical journey. I grew up playing music in church, so the kind of hymnal tradition is something that I love, and it's also such a central sound in South African music. And you know, so maybe when you say like the simple aspect, maybe it's something you're hearing in the harmony, kind of folkish melodies, but maybe the intricacy sometimes is just perhaps in some of the rhythmic aspects. But even there, you know, if something's in 3/4 or 4/4, I don't necessarily think of those things again as being simpler than something that's in some odd time signature. I just think of it as one thing. Actually, I don't really think in terms of time signature. For me, the primary is melody. So often when I compose, I come up with some kind of melodic shape, and I only figure out that there's something weird in terms of the time signature, or something is different or strange when I have to write it down. Up to that point, it sounds perfectly normal to me. It's like, okay, well, I think this is in 3 or this is in 4. And when I'm writing it down, suddenly it's like, oh, wait a second, I left out a here and I added in a thing here. You know, so I don't really think about it in those terms.
Yeah, your use of time is incredible. The fluidity of your time use. How do you expect your players to keep up with it? I was wondering. I mean, you're constantly playing with time. Your compositions, sometimes you're not even entirely sure what key signature you're in. So do you pick the musicians particularly on their use of time?
Yeah, I don't know. I've always had the expectation that the people that play with me can get the music easily, because, like I say, I don't think of the music as being difficult. And to be honest, if I can just quickly go back to that session when we recorded the album over 2 days, and I think we only had 2 rehearsals. We had a rehearsal the day before the actual recording, and then we had another rehearsal like maybe a week before, because Ildo, the bass player, was going off to Mozambique in the week between, and they had never seen that music before. But both Ildo and Riley are like, they are amazing musicians who also happen to have just incredible rhythmic sense. And I suppose for myself, I've always, worked with musicians who, when I was coming up, kind of serving an apprenticeship, as it were, who always expected me to be able to just play their music. And for them, their music was easy. Well, it was easy because it was their music. And so for me as well, I think of my music as being easy because it's my music. But I think part of this journey is also so much to do with trust. And sometimes when we go into the music, even into the recording of it, we know that we don't know the music as well as we should. So we know that, for example, there's a weird thing that happens there, but we also know that we can kind of skate our way around it. So it'll wobble, but we can trust each other that somehow coming out of that wobble, we're going to land on our feet. And so that element of trust is something that's, I think, so fundamental to what we do. And I think in terms of choosing musicians, for me, that's something that's important, is to find people that that don't mind getting lost, because that's something that I personally, I'm not trying to do it on purpose, but I often get lost. Like I often get lost in my own music and playing other people's stuff or playing standards or whatever, because if I don't have some element of risk, or if I always know exactly what I'm doing, then it kind of it becomes a bit too predictable. Or I think it's just just my personality that I like to change things up, and I like to talk, as you can hear. But I mean also in terms of music, I like conversations, and meaningful conversations are often about things that we don't know everything about. So if I'm an expert in something and you are not, and we're having a conversation about that thing, then it becomes more like a lecture. So I'm a teacher and you're a student and I'm telling you how this works. But if we're talking about something where both of us know as much or as little, then it makes for a much more interesting conversation, because then we kind of making all kinds of presumptions. There may be some science to it, but there's also a lot of imagination and what if, and what do you think about this, and so on. So even though it's my music, I don't want to be the lecturer telling the guys, well, this is how you play the music. I want it to be a conversation where it's like, well, I'm not really sure how we're going to navigate this, but let's just play through it. So this idea of playing through the music, let's just see how we get to the other side, is a very important aspect. And like I say, if I've got the right people who also enjoy that kind of fast and loose is the term I use, kind of, like that way of playing, then we're going to have a good time.
Great. When you are composing and improvising, is there anybody in particular that you draw from? Is it the same sort of ideas, or they're very different things?
I don't no, there's no particular person that I draw from. I just like I like ideas, and I try to do this thing as intuitively as I can. I mean, I've lived most of my life in music, making music. I have great curiosity about music, and for that reason, I know a lot about music. I mean, in terms of like music theory and chords and scales and time signatures and all of these kinds of things. But sometimes I find that information can be a bit of a trap, and it's kind of like not wanting to they say do something by the numbers. That's not what I want to do. So what's important for me in music is the idea of magic. For the thing that attracted me to music in the beginning was that it was something magical. And when I saw musicians performing, and especially jazz musicians who had never, you could see you go to a jam session, you could see that these guys didn't know each other. They got on stage and they started playing. And just, you know, with such kind of understanding and synchronicity, you think, how can they be doing this if they don't even know each other? They never met each other before. And then that was magical. And so that's something that that's important to me, to kind of retain that sense of the unknown. So when I compose, I'm also trying to follow something. And I don't really want to know how it's going to come out at the end. Sometimes like I say, after the fact, once I compose something, or if I've been composing for a long period of time, and I look back and then I see like a certain theme starts to emerge. So that was the case with this album. That I was writing a lot of songs, very short musical forms, and like you said, very simple in a way. And for me, what I figured out is, okay, actually there's some sense of the blues here. Not in the traditional way, in terms of the traditional harmonies, and maybe not always exactly the same kind of number of bars and all that kind of stuff, but just this kind of earthiness, which, like I say, for me is kind of rooted in this idea of celebration. But sometimes I can look over like a series of compositions and see that all of the songs I've been writing have been in the key of G. Sometimes like, you know, like for a whole year, for 2 years, I look at all my charts and so on, and I say, man, a lot of the stuff is in this key. And it's like, why am I writing all of this stuff in this key? Well, I don't know, maybe I'm tuning into some kind of frequency. But like I say, for me, the intuitive thing is important. And I generally write stuff that makes me feel good. Because I'm going to be the one that's playing it the most. You know, I play the piano, and it's kind of a self-contained thing. So all of the music on that album, you know, even if there was no bass player, no drummer, I'd still be able to play all of that stuff. I'd still be able to play the drums and the bass and melodies and all of that stuff on the piano, because that's how the music was kind of, you know, I was hearing all of that stuff and then kind of doing a reduction. You know, it's kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and then you expand it once you give it to the band. So for me, I feel like I write the music for myself because I like to listen to it and I like to play it because it makes me feel good. And when I say feel good, I'm actually talking about like on a vibrational level. And I think that this is something that's very important, and especially now during COVID. Because if I think about, you know, being at home, being able to go to the piano and to play music, to compose music, and what it's done for me in terms of quality, in terms of still having imagination, in terms of still reaching and still growing, and still feeling human in a way, also still feeling connected. Maybe not so much to people that I don't see as much anymore, but still kind of connecting to the, you know, to the universe in some kind of way. So for me, that's kind of a vital aspect of the compositional and the improvisational aspect as well. You know, in performance with a band, you've got people to play off of. But I think, like I said to you, conversation is primary for me. So as a composer, sometimes I'll have a musical idea, I play it, and then either Riley or Ildo or Talent, who plays on the bass on the actual concert, will play something. And now it's kind of like, well, here's my idea, but that idea is also very cool. So let's just see what that is. So, you know, sometimes it's also about letting go. They say life is about letting go. So, yeah, so these are all musical adventures, you know.
Bearing that in mind, do you ever compose with particular players in mind? Do you, for instance, I know that's quite a few of your students you play with. So when you compose, is it just intuition that you compose what is in your mind, or do you compose with particular players in mind that you know that you'll perform with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't really think in those terms, and I think the main reason for that is because is because I'm not surrounded by like a huge number of players, to be honest. In Durban, I mean, it's a relatively small scene, and you know, everyone's busy with their own stuff, and so it's very difficult to keep a band together. It's very difficult to get the people that you want for certain projects, and to get the kind of commitment that you need. I mean, it's just the way. It's just the way of the world. Sometimes, you know, I'll write something, and then once I've written it, then I'll be like, when I'm hearing, let's just say, the bass line or the guitar parts, then I'm hearing maybe sometimes a very specific sound, and then I'm like, whose sound is that? Who is that? So, for example, I've been writing some stuff recently, and I was hearing like a specific kind of guitar sound. I was like, who is this? And then I realized, oh wow, this is Ernie Smith. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, when you can finally get out of our bubbles, I'll be calling Ernie to say, hey Ernie, you know. But it's not that I intended writing it for Ernie. It's like I wrote it, and then it was like, that's the sound, that's the guy I need for this. Yeah.
Okay. Most of your pieces, if my understanding is correct, are based on experiences and moods. And I was wondering if there was any particular piece that you enjoyed playing the most.
Well, yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. Though. I mean, they all kind of feel different. So some of them are kind of much more tightly constructed, and sometimes some of them have a different kind of energy. So some of them are more kind of driving, and the band really, in a way, almost like more of a kind of rock sensibility. But then some of the things are very ethereal and very kind of landscape driven. And again, I think now, like under COVID, I mean, we haven't been up to the Drakensberg or to the Midlands in a while now, and some of the music on the album is inspired by some of those places. So when I play a tune like Kwantani, which is, you know, up in the Maluti Mountains, just on the border of the Free State, I can kind of imagine being there. You know, I mean, it looks over the Sterkfontein Dam. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And when I play that, it's kind of like, it just, you know, takes me to that kind of place. So I think, yeah, I mean, playing those things for myself now, it does feel kind of therapeutic in a way.
Have you found that COVID has impacted your playing? Spending more time at the piano? Have you thought more in depth about your playing? I mean, Concert for One, I know you say has come out of COVID. So do you think that you will come out of COVID as a better pianist?
Yeah, no, I don't think I'll come out of COVID as a better pianist. I'm just not that kind of person. I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this in public, and especially because I'm talking to students and so on. But I don't really practice. Now, I should kind of caveat that. Let me put it this way: I don't separate practicing the instrument from composing or from performing. For me, all of those things are kind of interlinked. So, in other words, you know, often people think of practicing, they think about playing lots of technical exercises. There's lots of scales and modes and arpeggios and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm kind of interested also, for example, in terms of like composing my own scales or putting like a certain sequence of intervals together, or like, you know, finding kind of interesting shapes, you know, to like play a scale, but find like an interesting place to repeat notes in the scale. You know, so to play, for example, let's just say I'm playing C major scale, but I'll, you know, so if you're playing C major scale, you play 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what if I play 1, 2, 3, and then instead of crossing under onto F, right, I'll go 1, 2, 3, and then I'll play E. I'll cross over onto E, you know, and then where I would normally cross over from B to C. So then I'll repeat D, you know. So it kind of comes up, you know, so I'm playing C, D, E, E, F, G, A, B, B, C. So, I mean, so those things are kind of tricky to play, but they're also like fun things to do. You know, it's like just play, because I mean, that's what it is, right? It's playing, like playing with a ball or something. So I'll do that and I'll fiddle around with it and then I'll say, oh, that's cool. Let me try and do it in a different key or put some black notes in. It's like, oh, wow, now it gets a bit more wobbly. You know, so I mean, I do that kind of stuff. I don't think it's making me a better pianist. Maybe it makes me more interesting or something. I don't know. But I mean, you know, it's just a different kind of aspect of what I was saying to you about being in this bubble, but still finding ways of having fun, ways to play, ways to keep the old gray matter moving. You know, yeah.
Is there anything further you'd like to say before we close off?
Well, I just want to, encourage young people to keep playing music, and especially to keep playing music with each other, because I think that especially when you're talking about music like jazz, which is fundamentally a group music. To me, that conversational aspect is something that's so primary to great jazz. I mean, I'll sound like an old man now, which I guess I am getting there, though I don't feel that by any means. But one of the things about kind of a YouTube generation is you see the most amazing young musicians, and they're so advanced technically. But when music just becomes about information, when it's just a scientific aspect, to me it's not as interesting. It's kind of like if you know all the solutions, well, what's the point? So for me, it's kind of like if you're playing with other people, they're going to throw you some curveballs. They're going to ask more questions. So if you think you've got all the solutions, well, you don't know that you've got all the solutions until someone tests your theory. So you've got to get into the room, onto the bandstand, and play to have fun, and play to listen. I mean, I think the best way to learn the music is to listen and play, and listen and play, and listen and play. Yeah.
Play and listen, play to listen. It's a good motto. Okay, great. Thank you for your time, Neil. To our viewers, if you would like to hear Neil's performance, go to nationalartsfestival.co.za and you will find his performance among many others. Thank you very much.